Hey everyone, it's Sevy. Xingqiu is back on the limited banner, and since he's one of the most powerful 4-star characters, I'd say it's time to make an updated guide on him. So if you pulled Xingqiu recently or are gearing up to build him into the incredible unit that he is, this guide will help you out. I'm going to cover his kit, playstyle, constellations, stat priorities, artifact sets, weapons, and team comps. Let's begin! It's no understatement to say that Xingqiu is a must-have character thanks to his kit that enables powerful team comps. He fills in the role of being a sub DPS support, applying Hydro to set up damage reactions for your DPSs or consistently freeze enemies and dealing off-field damage over time. Let's start with his skill. It strikes twice to deal Hydro damage, though it has a very long cooldown of 20 seconds. To make the damage even more impressive, it can do double vape reactions to double its damage. If you can apply a strong pyro aura on the enemy, don't underestimate the damage his skill can do with the right setup and buffs. Upon hitting an enemy, the skill generates 5 energy particles, which is the main source of energy to battery Xingqiu. However, it applies Hydro to himself, and that has an annoying consequence of self-freezing if he's affected by cryo. Aside from damage and energy, it applies the Rain Sword's effect, which you'll see orbiting him. At C0, you'll have 3 Rain Swords. When enemies hit you, the Rain Swords will break one by one and reduce the damage you take. But as long as one is active, you get increased resistance to interruption, and they apply wet on the nearby enemies, so that's additional Hydra application. Take note that this technically isn't a shield, and as such it doesn't work on effects that involve shields. The damage reduction is also increased based on 20% of Xingqiu's Hydro damage bonus stat. There is a cap at 24% damage reduction increase though, as indicated in the skill description. Once you unlock his first Ascension passive talent, Hydropathic, these Rain Swords will heal the active character when they break or expire based on a percentage of Xingqiu's HP. Considering all these effects, these Rain Swords are a great support buff. You get increased survivability, some Hydro application, and a bit of healing on the side. Now let's look at his burst, which is what makes him an insanely good sub DPS support. Activating it grants your team these Rain Sword attacks that will trigger when you do normal attacks and can be procced every second. With decent investment in his offense, these sword attacks deal good damage over time, but its top function lies in its constant Hydro application. If used in conjunction with a Pyro main DPS, it allows you to trigger consecutive vape reactions, greatly improving your total damage output. Alternatively, if used alongside cryo characters, their cryo application and Xingqiu's Hydro will help you output constant freeze reactions that disable and crowd control enemies. Or you can put him in an electrocharge comp as well. Enabling these reactions is a big part of what makes Xingqiu an invaluable support and a top choice for Hydro application. Additionally, the burst applies the same Rain Sword buff we discussed with his skill, the difference being that the Rain Swords will no longer break and will remain their maximum number for the burst's entire duration, translating to longer and reliable protection. The biggest challenge in activating his burst is its 80 energy cost, and given that Xingqiu's skill has a long cooldown, it can take a while to fully recharge his energy. We'll discuss later in the build section how to address Xingqiu's energy issues. And one more note on his burst is that it doesn't snapshot, so its damage changes depending on the active buffs on Xingqiu. As for how to prioritize his talents, you'll want to focus on getting his burst level as high as possible, and then follow it with his skill. Don't neglect the skill because once again, it can be a good damage source. The auto attack levels can be left alone, save your resources for more important things. Finally, I want to give a shout out to his third passive talent, which has a chance to refund your talent books whenever you craft, which actually translates to some resin saved. While Xingqiu's constellations aren't necessary to start using him, they do add great improvements to his kit. C1 gives him an extra Rain Sword, so now he has 4 maximum Rain Swords. This gives you a minor increased layer of protection and healing. C2 is his best early constellation. It extends your burst duration, but also reduces the Hydro resistance of enemies. Those 2 effects alone make him a more powerful sub DPS, a more consistent Hydro applier, and if used with another Hydro unit, allows them to deal more damage. If you're using Xingqiu a lot, this is an excellent early constellation to target. C3 increases his burst damage, a decent damage bump along with C2 if you can manage to get it. C4 increases his skill damage by 50% if you cast it while his burst is active. What's crazy about this is that the damage bonus is not additive to his other damage bonus multipliers. Instead, it's actually multiplicative of his total damage. That makes this constellation uniquely different to how other similarly worded constellations work and actually makes his skill very supercharged. C5 increases his skill level, and finally his C6. This is also an excellent constellation that helps his damage and energy, but the wording might be a bit weird, so let me try to simplify what it does. First, it modifies his burst to add more sword attacks every third hit. Without C6, his sword attack pattern is 2 swords, 3 swords, and repeat. But now with C6, the pattern becomes 2, 3, 5, then repeat. So more sword attacks overall means more damage. Second, he actually gets 3 energy back on the third attack. This helps a bit with his energy issues and lets you get away with having a bit less energy recharge than non-C6 builds. It's a nice final constellation that, for me, is well worth the wait to complete for Xingqiu lovers. So what are Xingqiu's artifact stats for a sub DPS build? For his circlet, you want crit, whether it's crit rate or damage will depend on your needs. Aim for at least 50 to 100 crit stats. If you don't have one, a temporary attack circlet will work. For the goblet, Hydro damage is the clear winner. Not only does it buff his damage, but it also helps the damage reduction effect of his ranged swords. However, a temporary attack goblet can also work. And for his sands, the first option should be energy recharge. Xingqiu really requires a lot of energy recharge to ensure that his burst uptime is consistent enough. 180 to 200% ER or so is a good target. Up to you if you want to increase or decrease depending on your personal experience. Would an attack stance work? In specific circumstances, yes, as long as he has enough ER from his weapon or substats, you could get away with an attack stance to increase his damage output. But until then, do not sacrifice his energy in favor of attack. Having his burst up consistently for its damage and Hydra application is a higher priority than dealing a bit more damage. As for the substats, aim for the usual crit, attack, and energy recharge. So what about his artifact sets? Let's look at low AR and high AR options. For the low AR artifacts, the Exile and Scholar sets are great choices to help with his energy, and the 4-piece Exile set in particular lets him be a better team battery. The 2-piece effects of Braveheart and Resolution of Sojourner set are also good for more attack. There's the Berserker set to help with his crit rate. And finally, the Gambler set is a strange choice as it's more oriented to his skill, but I can see it working in some cases wherein you use Xingqiu to finish off an enemy, thereby triggering its 4-piece effect, which means you can reuse the skill right away. As for high AR artifacts, here are our contenders. Xingqiu's best in slot is now the 4-piece emblem for obvious reasons. Its 2-piece effect adds energy recharge, and the 4-piece effect gives him a huge damage bonus. Assuming the average Xingqiu has 200% ER, it can give you a 50% damage bonus increase, which beats out any other set for burst damage. The other 4-piece option is the Noblesse set, which has the benefit of a team-wide attack buff. However, this shouldn't be used if you have another Noblesse user in your team, as they don't stack. It's also harder to proc its effect given Xingqiu's energy concerns and long cooldown. Outside of 4-piece sets, you can just settle for a combination of the following artifacts: 2-piece Heart of Depths, 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Emblem, and 2-piece Glad Shimenawa. The 2-piece Heart of Depths and 2-piece Glad Shimenawa at least have the benefit of also improving your skill damage. Now for his weapons. The top priority is weapons that help with his energy issues. First, your best 3-star option is the Sky Rider Sword. It gives a lot of energy recharge and increases Xingqiu's attack stat for more damage. The base attack is really low though, so it's really the ER you want. Then for the 4-star options, his best in slot is the Sacrificial Sword thanks to its incredibly high ER stat and the effect which can refresh your skill's cooldown. At higher refinements, it becomes so much better. Having that ability to use your skill twice in a row really helps get his energy and burst up. While it may not have the best damage, the burst uptime it enables is generally more valuable, which places it ahead of the competition even against 5 stars. Another ER weapon is the Favonius Sword. However, its effect isn't as helpful as the Sack Swords, especially since the Favonius passive can't be procced while its holder is off field. So you'll want at least 50% of crit rate to to ensure his on-field damage crits for the particles. I'd only really recommend it if you don't have the Sack Sword. If you have the Old Festering Desire, it's also a good ER weapon on him, with a nice buff to his skill. However, it's a limited time weapon and would only be recommended if you don't have the previous options. And the last 4-star recommendation is the Lion's Roar, but only if paired with Raiden. This is because the Lion's Roar has no ER, which really hurts Xingqiu's burst uptime. But with Raiden, she can compensate that thanks to her team energy recharge mechanics. That way, Xingqiu can enjoy the full buffs of Lion's Roar since Raiden applies Electro on enemies. And for 5-star options, the Skyward Blade is the top option for being the only 5-star energy recharge sword. You don't make use of its triggered effects, but at least it gives high base attack, a lot of ER, and a bit of crit rate. Now you can technically put other more damage-oriented weapons on Xingqiu. I won't list them all anymore, but if you plan to do that, you have to ensure that either his energy recharge is still sufficient for reliable burst uptime, or perhaps there's another teammate like Raiden who can battery him. Otherwise, an ER weapon is still the overall go-to choice. For team comps, the general principle is that Xingqiu shines in team comps that are about Hydro-related reactions, those being Vape, Freeze, and Electro Charge. So it depends on the units you have available on how you'll use his Hydro application then. Still, there are some widely acknowledged teams he's used on. His most popular team is the national team consisting of Xingqiu, Xiangling, Bennett, and Chongyun. There's a lot of synergy going on here. Most notably, C2 Chongyun helps reduce the cooldown of Xingqiu's talents, and Xingqiu is enabling constant vapes for Xiangling's Pyronado. Then there are variations of this team. There's the Kazuha National with Kazuha replacing Chongyun to shred enemy resistance and buff your team's elemental damage. Then there's the Raiden National with Raiden acting as a team battery for your energy-hungry party members. Then there are the Vape teams. The core idea is you have a Pyro DPS paired with Xingqiu who will help trigger constant reverse vape reactions. So there's Yoimiya, Diluc, Hu Tao, Yanfei, and Klee who are all great candidates for this. These Pyro DPSs have particular attack rotations that allow them to fully utilize vaporize reactions with Xingqiu. Hu Tao's charge attacks can be abused to proc vaporize charged attacks. Diluc will insert normal attacks between his skill to trigger vaporize on his skill charges. For Klee and Yanfei, their strong Pyro application can overpower Xingqiu's Hydro application, so they require certain attack combos to ensure their biggest Pyro hit actually vaporizes. If you're using them with Xingqiu, I'd recommend you look for more specific guides focused on how to use them optimally. Then there are Freeze teams. The top candidate would be Ayaka, whose consistent Cryo application paired with Xingqiu's Hydro application will help ensure your enemies stay frozen. If you want to run Chongyun as a main free shatter DPS, Xingqiu is a must pair too. Kaya and Rosaria are also good for freezing, but they can also be run as superconduct teams with Kaya or Rosaria as physical DPSs, with Xingqiu helping freeze and crowd control enemies. If you have Xingqiu at C2, he becomes more viable in team comps with another Hydro DPS, thanks to the Hydro resistance shred, particularly with Child or Kokomi. And then the other team members could likely be Electro for a Taser team, like Fischl and Beidou, coupled with an Anemo support who will shred Hydro resistance. Finally, there are also other Electro Charge teams where Keqing or Raiden could be the main DPS. Overall, Xingqiu slots in well with most teams. Even if they're not Hydro reaction focused teams, at least Xingqiu will give some decent off-field DPS damage. But of course, Xingqiu works the best on reaction teams that fully utilize his Hydro application. So that's going to be it for this updated Xingqiu guide, everyone. Let me know in the comments if you've just pulled Xingqiu or how you've built him and comped him in your experience. I would love to know. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like. Consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already for more Genshin guides and content, and I will see you soon. Take care!